All right. Hey, ladies, welcome to another episode of the Well Society. Today, we are going into our Refiner's Fire series where we are just learning about different stories of women who have been through the Refiner's Fire, what it was like before, during, and after. And these stories are so inspirational, and just my prayers that they move you to examine your Refiner's Fire through the lens of the Lord. Today, I have with us Lemon Price. She is a powerhouse entrepreneur, and an inspiring mentor to Christian women, and most of all, a wife, stepmom of two boys, and a dog mom. With her master's in marketing and journalism under her belt, plus years creating eight-figure sales campaigns for top brands, she knows just how hard it can be juggling the demands at work with those at home. That's why Lemon decided that God had called her on to do something different. So now she strives to support other faith filled ladies as they pursue their own marketplace ministry dreams, because everyone deserves the chance to follow their heart, no matter what stage of life one may find themselves in. So, welcome to the Well Society.
Thank you for having me, my friend. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, I am too. I am too. We've known each other for a while, and it's been great watching each other grow and change and refine our
Yeah.
messaging and our marketing for the Lord. So yeah, so Lemon is here with us today to talk about her faith journey, which we all have a story with our faith journey, but her journey is quite profound and intriguing, and something that she and I have had dialogue with for years now. And so when this Refiner's Fire podcast was kind of laid upon my heart, the Lord kept calling me to reach out to you to talk about this. So I'm just going to kick it off to you. Talk about like your faith as a child, like where you were growing up, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah. So I love talking about this because I am the least likely person to probably sit here and talk about faith, based on my childhood because growing up, I was raised in an anti-Christian household. And when I tell people that, so often they're like, "Oh, so like your family just like didn't go to church and stuff." And I'm like, "No, no, no. Like they were like anti-Christian. They made fun of Christians. I was always told that Christians were intellectually inferior to me, right? So it's so funny because both of my parents like graduated high school. They didn't go to college, but they were like very hardcore on like me taking the honors classes and doing all of those things. And so they're like, Christians are intellectually inferior to you. And so that's the worldview I sort of grew up with, and, I remember being, like, 10, and so clearly it was while my parents were getting divorced that God was like, "You're gonna move to the South," right? I grew up in New Jersey. "You're gonna move to the South, you're gonna meet a man in church, you're gonna have 2 boys and a girl." We're still waiting on that girl. Um, and, "You guys are gonna, like, raise your kids in the gospel and all of these things." I'm like, that literally makes 0% sense to me because here I am with this family that is hateful towards Christians. So I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, we're gonna, raise our kids in the gospel and I'm gonna meet a man in church." I'm like, "What does that even mean?" And, so it was really funny that, can you hear that?
Mm-mm. No.
Okay. Okay, good. They're, like, doing all the work under the house, and I can hear the plumbers
Oh
talking.
no.
And I'm
Uh-uh.
like, "Can you hear this?" Okay, good. I was really nervous. Alright, sorry, you're gonna have to edit that
You're
out.
fine.
Okay. Um, and so I just remember being so confused by this vision that I have. I'm like, None of this makes sense to me." And then I see how it's so funny, right? I had this very clear vision, and there was, like, twice in my life that I was like, "Oh, this person's the person for me." I did not meet this person in church, and the situation was very bad. One of the people I met, right? We met at freshman orientation when I moved to the South, so I came to school in South Carolina, met him at freshman orientation, and then, we talked all summer, and then the night before classes, he sexually assaults me, and ESPN broadcasts my assault, a reenactment of my assault, and, um, the football coach goes on ESPN to talk about what a wonderful Christian this man is because I was at a D1 school, and there was cameras everywhere, and, I was being harassed by all of these quote unquote, like, good Christians, and so I was like, "This doesn't make like, okay, like if this is how Christians behave, then I don't necessarily want any part of it.
Right.
And so I go on like a very downward spiral. I was drinking so heavily. I remember drinking like a pint of Captain Morgan or whatever every single day for
Oh my
like
goodness.
years, for years. And it was a very bad time. It was super bad time. And so then I'm at the height of this like terrible season that I'm in. I'm like I was out at the bar every week. My best friend and I, we had no tab because we were such regulars at the bar. And like, I was in my prime. I was 24. So there was always men around and all these things. So the bar was like, great, like they'll just buy drinks and like we just won't charge you guys for yours. And so I was in the height of this downward spiral that I have. And then my neighbor invites me to like her Bible study, which I'll like get into in a second. But, she says her marriage is good because of the gospel and things. So I'm like, great. Like, sign me up. I'm in. If your marriage is successful, your children are successful because of Jesus, then like, I want in on that situation because I come from brokenness. I've experienced the ugly side of quote unquote Christians, and so I'm like, I'm in, sign me up. And so I meet my first husband at a bar, right, in Atlantic City. Again, not what God told me I was going to do, but I marry this man anyway. And, we're in church together. We're doing all the things that you're supposed to do. Um, I have several miscarriages during this time period. And I was, again, so angry at God. And then I became even angrier when my now ex-husband got addicted to opioids
Oh, wow.
and became physical with me. And I'm like, where are you in like God, like where are you in this season? Like I don't understand, Um, and I remember people at church telling me like I could try to reconcile, we could try to get him into rehab, like all these things. And I'm like, he just threatened to kill me. Like, and has the ability to do so, right? He was in the military. And so like he could, he was in ranger school. Like he definitely has the ability to cause me harm. And I'm like, where's God in this? Where like these good Christians that I keep hearing, like, I don't understand. If everybody here is following God, like, why is this happening? I do not understand. And so I was so angry. I was so angry at God, and now I can look back and I'm so thankful. Right. Like I tell my husband all the time, like now I'm like, I'm so grateful for those miscarriages, or like I'd be tied to somebody who was abusive my whole life. Like I'm like, okay, God, like I see you, right? It hurt in the moment, but like I see your hand in this. And so I was like, I just need to break from church. I need to like remove myself. I need to just spend like some alone time. And so I moved to Georgia where I didn't know anybody. And I remember I went through like a period, like there was like 3 weeks I didn't even leave my apartment because I lived in a gated community. I lived like where the heart of everything sort of was happening. So like I could get my groceries delivered and food delivered and like I didn't have to leave. And so I just had a ton of alone time. And it was like during that period, I was like, you need to like get to know me and like who you are in that process. And so I went through a whole like identity study and everything. And I was like, okay, God, like I see you in this. So I was like, I'm gonna go back to church. I'm gonna like do things. And I found a church local to me. And that's where I met my husband. And he had two boys. And I was like, okay, God, it's I see you. I see you. And it's a wild journey that we went on. And my husband comes from a pagan and Satanist background too. And so I'm from New Jersey. He's from Texas. We met at a church in Southeast Georgia. I'm like, none of this makes sense
Yeah.
unless it was God.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's I love what you said about how like you're so thankful for it all because
Yeah.
that's not something like if somebody on paper in the world were to look at all the things that you just described, they'd be like, "Oh, well, that's okay if she decided to be bitter or it's okay if she's angry or whatever." But then you're like totally flipping that script and saying, "No, like I'm really thankful for what happened."
Yeah. 100%. And I look back to it the way I was raised and I'm like, I would not even have ended up necessarily in this situation with like that guy in college if I had been raised differently. So, um, my parents split when I was 10 and my dad was an alcoholic. Um, and I haven't really seen him since I was in the eighth grade, right? And I'll be 33 soon. And so, or that's a very long time to not have that relationship at all. And so my mom, it was very interesting. Um, we haven't spoken in 4 years because of my faith. Um, but my mom was always like, I need you to go to the best schools, take the best classes. Like, she was really on top of me about the way my body looked and things because it was like the only way in her mind, I guess, that I would be successful is to marry somebody wealthy. And like, I remember dating a guy in college. I mean, we were on and off for almost a decade. And it was never healthy. It was never a good situation, but my mom would, like, encourage me to go back to it because he came from money,
Mhm.
and she's like, "So you'll be okay." Right? And so my body was like a means to an end, um, and that's completely the way I was raised, um, and so I struggled with, like, eating disorders because of it and all of these things because, I mean, I was that was the only way I was gonna be successful in life, and, um And so I ended up in this situation in college because I'm like, okay, like here's a D1 athlete. Like the only way to secure this relationship and to have it be right, like we talked for 2 months. Now we're here in person. Like I'm gonna have to do something. And then, and it was so funny. I remember like not wanting to, and telling him I didn't want to, and he was like, well, like I'm already here, basically. So deal with it. It's kind of the And I remember him apologizing for it after, like, he texted me and apologized for it afterward, and I was just like, "I guess this is, like, what happens now." You know what I mean? Like, all I am is a body for people to use,
Mhm.
um, and I remember I was so angry at God for the whole thing,
Mhm.
but now I'm like, "All right," like, I see you in that. I've been able to talk to so many people. I remember, like, the campus calling me, like, a decade later. And they were writing a piece on it because they were like, "Because you came forward, it changed the entire way we handle, like, our sexual assault policy." And I'm like, "Okay." Like, yes, that was terrible, but I can see now how God has, like, used it for, like, I had no idea this was happening over a 10-year period, that they were refining the way that they do things, and, it just so happened the president of the college had a family member be assaulted, and so he took what happened to me very personally and made
Yeah.
huge waves, like, on the campus because of it,
Yeah.
and I was just like, "Okay," like, yes, it was terrible, but I can also see how God used it.
Yeah, and it's always in his time and in his way, like a decade
Yeah,
later, it coming up. And there's probably a lot of inner work that he wanted to do with you before you were able to receive that phone call in a healthy way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, right, I had to completely transform the way, like, I felt about the whole thing, change how I felt about myself, right? Offer myself forgiveness and grace, like, I've done the same to him, I even,
Mhm.
like, reached out and I was like, "Listen, like, we were 18 years old. Like, I don't hold you accountable for what you did at 18. Like, so if that's a burden you're holding on to, like, let it go.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay."
Yeah.
So, it's been a really interesting journey to see how God has taken, like, some of the absolute worst things and used it for, like, his purpose.
Mhm. Yeah, and scripture tells us that he will. Like
Yeah,
when we turn around and lay it down at his feet, how he can turn anything. He can restore the years that the locust destroyed.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, so how did you come to a place of reaching like the unapologetic gospel of who God is, who Jesus is, and what he does for us in our salvation? Like how did you come from Christians are not intelligent, Christians are like goofy people to Christians are like not nice to, oh wow, Jesus really loves me and I want to now you're on this mission to help other women.
yeah. A big part of it for me was really having this, like, solitude, right? So I lived alone in Georgia. I didn't know a single soul. And it was really interesting how I ended up here, right? So I was back in New Jersey. I went to my grandparents' house while I was filing for divorce and all of those kind of things for my first husband. And I remember like hanging out with my neighbor and stuff. And, I'd gone to church with her and she was like, "What is your next move? Like, are you going to stay in New Jersey? Like, what are you doing?" And I was like, "No, I'm going to go to Georgia." And she was like, "Why?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know." And she was like, "Okay, sounds good." Like, I guess, whatever you're going to do. She's like, "Do you know anybody?" No, don't know a single soul. She's like, "What are you going to do down there?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. I'm moving. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to be obedient and I'm going to move." And so I moved here. And because I didn't know anybody, I just had so much time in the scriptures, like so much time was spent reading and learning. And, because I kind of felt super stupid,
Mhm.
as somebody who like grew up an academic, I felt so stupid. Like, at this point, I had been, you know, a follower for 4.5-ish years, right? And I didn't know that the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and the New Testament was written in Greek. Like, I didn't know those things. And so I just felt so dumb. And I was like, I cannot sit with this. That's just not my nature. And so I'm like, I dove into research land and learning all that I could. And the more I learned, like the more that I hungered, and finally came to a place where I'm like, people are flawed, and that church hurt and all of those things is not necessarily a reflection of who God is, but an imperfect creation trying to reflect something perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we try to reflect that perfectness, which I mean, we none of us are going to be perfect, but we try to reflect it, it almost can shine a magnifying glass on all of our imperfections.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what I took from it, is like I totally understood where people were coming from and why they said and did the things that they did, but we can never do it perfectly. And I just had to be okay with that and be like, that is not who God is. And, coming to this place where, like God does use everything for his purpose and for his glory. And so I just have to trust that everything that I've been through is for a purpose and my journey is for a purpose. And, you know, I just and I feel that way now. Like everything, we go through, we're like, there's got to be a purpose to it. My husband always prays he like thanks God for the good times and perceived bad times.
Perceived bad times. I love that.
Yeah, so that's like something our kids take with them all the time. Like, yes, this feels bad right now, but that doesn't mean it is bad.
Right. Right. And that's part of that refiner's fire. Like that's where we feel that discomfort. It's like, why this feels really uncomfortable, and it's not a place where I necessarily want to be, but it's good. Like when we step in that refiner's fire, the Lord is chipping away those things that maybe we're too stubborn to let go of, or we don't know we need to let go of. And so he's just chipping away, and so that he can shape us and mold us and create us to where it is he wants us to go. Yeah. So, as we wrap this up, so what would be some encouragement that you would give to a woman who is maybe in the refiner's fire right now with her faith? Like if you go back to some of those really tumultuous years of like being in that refiner's fire, now that you're on the other side, what encouragement would you give her with her faith?
I would say to just like, right, there's a verse about like leaning not on our own understanding, right? Romans 8:28 talks about how God's going to use everything for his purpose, right? Even if it's meant for evil, he will use it for his purpose. And so, and I know it sounds so, it's hard to hear in the moment, right? Like it's hard when things are not going the way you expect them to. It's hard when things are hard. Like right now, we have no water in my house for 2 days, right? That is really hard. I'm like, why God, this is not ideal, right? This is a really terrible thing, like brushing my kids' teeth with water bottles and things right
Mm-hmm.
now. And I'm like, this is, we've had a very tumultuous week in our household because I took a big faith step forward. And I'm like, I see you from the enemy, right? And so I would remind you like that the like God's already gone before it. The victory is already his. And so, yes, the enemy can throw things at you. He can make it difficult, but at the end of the day, like God is going to use whatever it is you're going through, whatever your situation is, whatever doubt you have, whatever is going on in your world, he will use it for a purpose. And you may never see that purpose, right? And yeah, you have to be okay with that too, is maybe you never see like the harvest, right, from the fruit that you plant. And that's
Mhm.
okay. That's
Yes.
okay because God sees it.
Right, because it's not about us, it's about him
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Yeah, oh, that's beautiful. Well, how can people, if people want to get in touch with you, continue the conversation, or just know more about what you do, what are some ways that they can get in touch with you?
You can find me on all social media. Just look for Lemon Price. I'm probably the only one in existence. So, if you find another one, I'd be super shocked. But you will see my bright blonde hair, right? Because you can't be named Lemon without being a blonde. And so
That's right.
you'll see me everywhere, on all the social media platforms.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, friend.